Are you ready to dive into the world of project management? Hit that subscribe button as we explore how to stay relevant in the agile workforce. Stakeholder engagement is one of the most critical components to all projects. So you can follow along on the EverTech and the project leaders page by downloading the study guide. A stakeholder is an individual, group, or an organization that may be affected by or perceived to be itself affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project, program, or a portfolio. Identification, analysis, and engagement includes stakeholders who are internal, external, supportive, non-supportive, or neutral. Stakeholder analysis. This is systematically gathering quantitative and qualitative information to determine whose interests should be considered throughout the project. Stakeholder engagement includes implementing strategies and actions to promote the productive involvement of stakeholders. We're going to talk about when you're going to want to start this stakeholder engagement. Activities start before and continue throughout the project. So you're going to do this before, and it's going to continue throughout the whole entire project and even post-project. You're going to start by defining and sharing a clear vision. And this clear vision establishes a clear vision with those key stakeholders. Then you can agree on what can be challenging and what you're going to engage upon and communicate about. And what's that tempo? What's going to be that flow? We're going to talk about stakeholder identification. This is what you're going to do early on. You're going to first start off with high-level identification. And this is typically carried out prior, but you're going to do more detailed stakeholder analysis and identification progressively throughout the project. You're going to want to understand and analyze for certain key performance indicators. Once you identify the stakeholders, the project manager and the project team should understand the stakeholders' feelings, emotions, beliefs, and the values. Those are going to drive their assumptions. This can lead to additional threats and opportunities for a project outcome. As you see on this chart that we have right here, we have 8 ways that you can analyze stakeholders. It's not comprehensive, but these are critical areas that you would want to analyze your stakeholders. We're going to start from the top. We can look at their power, their impact, their attitude, and their beliefs. We can also analyze their expectations, their degree of influence, the proximity to the project, and also their interest in the project. There are other aspects that you can analyze as well. Those are just a quick little highlight of some common areas that stakeholders would want to be analyzed and mapped towards. Effective execution. The reason why you want to have effective execution with stakeholder engagement is because you want to have great working relationships with all your stakeholders. Ultimately, the reason that you're there as a project manager is to make sure that those stakeholders are happy and satisfied with those outcomes. You want to have a stakeholder agreement with those project objectives. The project beneficiaries are supportive and satisfied. Stakeholders who oppose the project or the deliverables, they negatively impact project outcome. You also want to engage with stakeholders. Working collaboratively with stakeholders introduces projects that elicit the requirements. You're able to elaborate and you're able to understand more and elicit those requirements because you're engaging those stakeholders. You're understanding them more. You're managing their expectations, resolving issues more proactively. You're negotiating, prioritizing, problem solving, and you're helping them make decisions. And you're using your influence to help with that decision making. By engaging with these stakeholders, you're going to have soft skills such as active listening, interpersonal skills, conflict management, as well as leadership skills such as establishing that vision and critical thinking. This engagement is either going to be written, verbal, it can be informal or formal. You're also going to want to make sure that you prioritize your stakeholders when you're engaging them, because the project team, you're going to compete with initial prioritization of your stakeholders. Some are going to have different priorities. You're going to have to weigh those. It's going to be expected to focus on the ones with the most power and the interest. The ones with the most power and interest move the needle on the project. So you want to make sure that you prioritize those requests. You want to make sure that you understand the lines of engagement, levels of engagement. And as events unfold, we need to reprioritize based on new stakeholders or evolving changes in the stakeholder landscape. There's many various different forms of communication that you're going to have when you're engaging these stakeholders. We'll talk about verbal, written, formal, and informal types. So we'll first talk about verbal forms. Verbal forms, and we'll talk about formal. Formal are preferred because, as you'll see, the informal things can get lost in the context, and we'll discuss it a little bit later. So formal, verbal, you have presentations, project reviews, briefings, product demos, and brainstorming. These are formal ways of communicating with stakeholders. Informal ways just could be a conversation or an ad hoc discussion. Let's talk about some written forms of communication. So formal written forms of communication include progress reports, project documents, and business cases. Informal are just briefing notes and email, instant messaging, text, and social media. So you see the variance, the degrees of difference. You would want to have more formal, but you obviously have to understand that you want to balance it out with informal as well. Not all communication needs to be formal. There are also communication methods. And we have a video about this as well, a communication video, effective methods for communication, and also a series as well, where you can learn a little bit more about this. But we have push, pull, and interactive. Push communication. This is when communication is sent to stakeholders, such as memos, email, status reports, and voicemails. It's just one-way communication. It inhibits the way of gauging the reaction and assessing the understanding because you're just pushing the information out to the stakeholder. Pull information is quite the opposite. This is sought out by the stakeholders. The stakeholders are using intranet, running internet searches, and also using online repositories to search for information. They're pulling information. The last one is interact. This is the most engaging form of communication. This is exchanging information with one or more stakeholders, such as conversation, phone calls, meetings, brainstorming, and product demos. This is the preferred method, the interact. Quick feedback loops are critical because they provide helpful insight for your engagement and your communication. This confirms the degree of whether the individual that you're communicating with heard the message. You want to determine if you agree or if you disagree. You want to gain helpful insights, and you also want to identify nuance or unintended messages that the recipient detected. So then also you want to monitor communication. We're talking about effective communications, particularly with stakeholders. The effectiveness of stakeholder engagement and communication needs to be monitored throughout the project. This is very critical because the degree of stakeholder satisfaction is determined by having a conversation with the stakeholders, engaging their satisfaction with project deliverables, and also the overall management of the project. So the project iteration reviews, product reviews, stage gates, and other methods are ways that you can get that periodic feedback from the stakeholder. And a stakeholder engagement plan, which is a component of the project management plan, must be updated to achieve that stakeholder satisfaction. This is something that you want to make sure that you're consistently monitoring, updating, and engaging with, because stakeholder engagement is something that can either make or break your project. It's better to engage more than less with your stakeholder, because stakeholders want to know what's happening. Unless they are uninterested and they don't care about the project, then they want to be engaged. They're invested. You want to make sure that you have this information listed in your stakeholder engagement plan. And a lot of this information goes into your communication plan. These are components of your project management plan. And this helps you with ensuring that your projects stay on task, because effective communication and stakeholder engagement go hand in hand with making sure that all individuals that can be perceived affected or perceived to be affected by a project are kept abreast. Thank you for following. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again. Thank you for joining us today. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more project management content. See you on the next one.